Before we begin, promise yourself to watch this video to the very end. The last few sentences change the shape of everything that comes before them. Chapter 1. The House That Remembered Laughter. Eliza Hart had learned how to carry silence around like a tote bag. Useful, ordinary, and dangerous only when you forgot you were holding it. The home she kept in northwest London still remembered a laughter that had thinned to photographs. 2 children, Poppy with her ink-stained thumbs and Max with his shoes forever untied, moved through its rooms like weather fronts. She kept a whiteboard on the fridge titled Schedule of Almost Disasters. It had 3 columns. What, when, and who forgot. She was honest enough to add her own name. I watched all this from the polite distance of a neighbor and friend. The sort of man who helps carry a box of winter coats and leaves with a jar of jam he did not deserve. If you think a male narrator is not up to the business of telling a story like this, I ask only that you stay with me a few chapters longer. On a Tuesday salted with errands, Eliza's kettle boiled over, and she laughed at herself for whispering sorry to a machine. Her late husband's blue scarf still lived on the back of a kitchen chair, and some morning she found her fingers petting its fringe before she knew she'd reached for it. She had made peace with the unglamorous art of getting on. She had not made peace with the way joy sometimes scratched at the windows. At night, after the children grumbled themselves to sleep, she answered letters from strangers. She had stumbled into a column at a digital magazine, a late appointment in life, as she called it, titled Half Past Brave. It was advice, memoir, and mischief all in one, and she wrote it in the voice of a woman learning, anew, to turn toward the sun without shielding her eyes. Chapter 2. The Column That Refused to Whisper. The city, the entire brilliant, exasperating city, began writing back. A florist confessed to filling empty vases with rainwater and pretending it was champagne. A bus driver wrote that grief was a passenger who never tapped out. Eliza printed the letters and tucked them under the sugar canister. She drank her tea too strong and let the caffeine borrow hours she could not spare. She met her editor in a cafe that smelled of cinnamon schemes. Graham Pike had a quiet kindness and the haircut of a man who could find his glasses faster if he would stop wearing them on his head. He wanted a book of Eliza's columns. He wanted a tour. He wanted, in his shy, managerial way, for Eliza to become the sort of woman who asked for things. She said she would think about it. She did not say that thinking about it felt like releasing a kite and remembering you were afraid of heights. At home, Poppy asked why adults always said maybe when they meant not yet, and Max asked if grief had a weight limit. Eliza told them the truth. Maybe was a not yet with polite manners, and grief could lift a car or weigh no more than a moth, depending on the day. Chapter 3. The Boy with the Bright Drumsticks. It was a school fundraiser that planted the first bright flag in the soil of what came next. A community hall, a string of fairy lights, the kind of mince pies that tasted like tradition and disappointment. The band had borrowed someone's uncle's speakers. The drummer was younger than the rest by a decade and a half. He had a face that looked like open windows and the kind of laugh the room wanted to keep. He called himself Noah Reed, and I learned later he taught music, repaired old guitars, and made a habit of talking to shy children in the exact tone he used with famous people. As if both were temporarily lost and might like a map. Eliza spent the evening carrying a tray of sausage rolls, refusing to admit she was waiting to be surprised. Noah came over during the raffle to ask if anyone had requested a song. Poppy, whose bravery often arrived ahead of herself, announced that her mum was famous on the internet. There is no safe place to hide after a child says this in public. Eliza, who had written an entire column about how a woman could be 51 and brand new at the same time, pretended she didn't blush. Noah had read her work. He said it without ceremony. Then he said something else that snagged in her chest. It makes me feel like I could start again without apologizing. Later, by the stack of donated books, he asked for her email, then handed her his phone and said, "Save yourself in there so I don't write to the wrong stranger." The next morning, Eliza typed a message. Carefully rehearsed and 4 sentences longer than cleverness required. She sent it to the wrong Graham. The reply came swiftly. "While I admire your clarity, Eliza, I fear I am both too old and too employed to play the drums." She laughed until she had to sit down. She sent a corrected message to Noah. "Would you accept an apology pie in lieu of dignity?" He wrote back, "Only if I can bring ice cream to attend the ceremony." Chapter 4. The Field Trip of Tiny Emergencies. They saw each other again on a Wednesday, equally accidental and not, when the Year 5 trip to the museum needed chaperones and panic had emptied the sign-up sheet. Eliza came with a backpack full of plasters and oranges. Noah came with string, a screwdriver, and the kind of optimism you keep in a pocket. On the bus, Max nursed a grievance because someone else had claimed the seat over the wheel. Poppy discovered her shoelaces only after they were wedged under the chair leg. One of the boys complained of a stomach that forecasted doom. Noah, with the competence of a well-placed comma, untangled, soothed, and told a story about how even drums got stage fright. Eliza watched him speak to the children and felt that dangerous, clean sliver of delight that slices directly through cynicism. Here was a man who could be careful with small things. At the museum, a child got lost in a room full of glass eyes. I will not comment on the taste of curators, only on the speed at which Eliza and Noah moved. They found the boy in a corridor studying a painting of a ship in a storm. Noah knelt and told him storms look worse from inside them than they do from afterward. The child nodded as if this were the sort of information all adults should carry in their wallets. By the time the bus rolled home over the cathedral of potholes that constitute spring in this city, Eliza had learned that Noah's mother ran a cafe by the canal and that he liked old movies because newer ones seemed too sure of themselves. She in turn let slip that she sometimes mistook caution for loyalty and needed to be corrected. Chapter 5. The Dinner with Too Many Candles. They attempted a first dinner like responsible people, which is to say with an agenda and napkins. Eliza cooked from a recipe that required more time than sorrow. The children took to Noah the way Ivy takes to brick. Poppy asked if he was going to be on the radio. Max demanded that he teach him to play something loud. Noah obliged on the table with forks. They all laughed. After the children were bribed upstairs with chapters and promises, a quiet settled with the grace of an old pet. Noah reached for one of the too many candles and blew it out, and the room felt a degree less eager. He asked her if she was afraid that beginning again meant ending something. She said she knew beginnings made ghosts jealous. He nodded like a man who admired a truth even when he could not argue with it. They kissed the way careful people do, without bargaining but with a reverence for consequences. Then Eliza stepped back, not because the world tilted, but because it steadied. She said she wanted to move at the speed of honest thought. He said he didn't mind becoming a verb instead of a destination. The things people say when they mean please don't run away. After he left, she looked at the blue scarf on the chair and said aloud that love was not a betrayal but a permission. The house did not answer, but something in it relaxed, the way a hand unclenches in sleep.
Chapter 6. The Broadcast in the Rain.
On the night everything inside her rearranged, a storm took the city by the shoulders. The magazine's studio lost power, and the emergency plan had the elegance of a shopping list. Eliza, unwilling to surrender her weekly column-turned-broadcast, decided to do the show from her kitchen. You can laugh, but there are worse places to tell the truth than between a kettle and a jar of pasta. Noah arrived with cables and a portable mixer, soaked and glowing with the unwarranted confidence of youth and competence. I lent a lamp and a steady pair of hands and confessed I had once dreamed of radio. There we were, 3 people soldering together a possibility while the rain flattered every window in the street. Eliza took a breath and went live to a city that did not know she was in slippers. She spoke about the strange arithmetic of resilience. How the first laugh after grief feels like theft, how the second feels like interest, and how the third reminds you the bank was always yours. Letters arrived in the chat like flares. A woman in her 60s who wore red for the first time in years. A man who took his wedding ring off a chain around his neck and placed it in a box marked safe instead of shrine. Then Eliza said something that I believe, even now, was the hinge on which the door swung. There is a difference between moving on and moving forward. Only one of them asks you to leave yourself behind. The silence after had that rare, sacred resonance of listeners who are not moving in their chairs because something in them has just stood up. When she finished, the storm still pulled at the gutters, but the world had the look of a room where a decision had been made. Noah wrapped the cable, and their eyes met with the easy gratitude of people who had built a bridge no one would ever see, but many would cross. Chapter 7. Morning, with Markets and Mercy. In the merciful light of Saturday, I watched from the bakery line as Eliza and Noah crossed the market like people trying not to scare a good thing. The air smelled of oranges. Someone tuned a guitar behind a stack of apples. Poppy bargained for tulips with the zeal of a solicitor. Max carried a loaf of bread so carefully you'd think it held a map to buried treasure. Graham arrived, as editors and ex-maybe-somethings do, with a proposal for a book tour that had the word brave in its headline and a schedule that would frighten cattle. He glanced at Noah, measured the complication, and then did the decent thing. He told Eliza that her words had built a room and invited a city into it, and if she wanted, he would help her open more doors. He did not attempt to sell her any version of herself she had not ordered. It was, in its way, a small act of love. Eliza chose, in that elegant, unfussy way her choices often arrived, not between men but between fears. She chose to be embarrassed in public if needed. She chose to be adored without apology. She chose forward over on. That afternoon, in the living room the house had learned again to warm. Eliza read from an early chapter of the book she had decided to write. Noah, on the floor with Max, repaired a toy spaceship. Poppy drew a tattoo in pen on her own wrist that read Keep. The scarf stayed on the chair, not as a warning but as a witness. I am a man who believed in quiet, in letting life pass like a parade he would watch and never join. I tell you this tale because I watched Eliza discover that age is not a lock, that grief is not a border, and that the human heart keeps a spare room for guests it thought it had no space to receive. The last line she wrote in that day's chapter, which I copied to carry with me, goes like this: Love does not replace what was. It teaches you to carry it without breaking your hands. If you waited for a twist, perhaps it is this. The story asks no permission from the past. It bows to it, kisses its forehead, and then opens the window. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications so you never miss a new tale, give a like to support the work, leave a comment with your favorite line, and share the video with someone who believes in second chances.